Namaste everyone. Today we continue our series on Mother's commentary on the Dhammapada. As we all know that Dhammapada is the most revered text in the Buddhist tradition. It's a manual for contemplation given to us to show us the path, what to do, how to do. And in the last few explorations, we have seen how to control the mind, discipline the mind, how to live a well-examined life, how to become more and more aware, how to reduce the gap between knowledge and practice, and bring more and more an idea into our own experience. And to continue this exploration, today we'll be taking the next chapter, which is titled The Sage, and we will be exploring it through the lens of purification. So the title which we have kept for today is Purification as a Path to Progress. And in the starting, I would also like to add one more word with P, since there are three words: process. That one very important thing for all of us to understand is that whatever we are experiencing right now, whatever we are exploring, it is all a process. It is not just a one-time affair. And especially walking on the path of yoga, if we keep this very essence in the beginning, that I'm beginning on a path which is a process of contemplation, of exploration, of experience, and there is no one place which I'm like, I have arrived. It's like one point will lead me to another, and that is the ultimate goal of merging with the divine. So that is the aspiration which all of us hold, and that is that will to progress, which is fueled by this aspiration, and that is what keeps us going on the path. And once we walk on this path with sincerity, that is when the actual purification begins. And once this actual purification begins, we our own self realize that we are really progressing. We see a sense of movement. It not may be so tangible that I have moved from point A to B, but in my experience I will find that shift. And that shift, essentially, we are talking about the shift of consciousness. All we are talking about on these subjects of, say, yoga, spirituality, essentially we are speaking about expansion of consciousness. That how from a narrowed state of ignorance, we can go to the base of knowledge. That is the whole journey. And in fact, the chapter which I will be referring today, the Sage, and the precursor to that, the Fool. These two chapters, Mother has essentially spoken about what to avoid and what to gravitate towards. So she says that you should avoid the company of a fool, rather aspire for, say, company of a sage. Or it's better to be alone than be in a bad company. And this statement is not something new to us. All our growing up years, we have always been told by our parents, choose your friends wisely, make sure you're going to the right place, don't be in the company of bad people. Maybe at that point, it is very restricted to, say, students who take you away from, say, studying, or don't play with people who are playing things which your parents would not like it. So in their own narrow sense of ignorance, they try to protect you. But on the larger scale, the principle remains the same. So as we grow deeper in our own being, we really come to the idea in our own way. We avoid places which narrows down our consciousness, people who narrow down our consciousness, and we gravitate towards more and more to people with whom we feel a sense of expansion. We feel a sense of wideness. Like, for example, say, a setting like this. We just come here, we listen to the music, we listen to somebody who's saying something, but there's a sense of that togetherness, that yes, we are on a path together, though exploring our individual journey, but there's some commonality, and that commonality is aspiration to grow, aspiration to progress. So even if we hold on to that one tiny thing which binds all of us together, that is in the collective which we grow. And as we often explore this idea that it's the individual that we bring to the collective. So the individual purification leads to the collective purification. The movement in collective also influences the individual. So the consciousness play is simultaneously at the individual as well as the collective level. And that is when more and more we realize in our own being, we are able to contribute more and more to the collective. And that is how the whole idea of transformation will come true. That we begin with purification, but we don't limit ourselves to purification. It is just the beginning. And as we purify more and more our own being, and we'll come to it, maybe we'll share a few ideas of how to do that, that is what will set the base for transformation. Because if we understand purification in a more general term, or say in the traditional setup, we realize that, okay, there's a surface nature given to us. This nature has a lot of impurities. We have to let go of these impurities, reject the impurities, and find and merge with the truth. So that is the basic idea which we have all been given in that sense. But when we look at the same idea from, say, the integral lens, or what Sri Aurobindo and Mother have given to us, it says that it's okay. The first and the foremost step is to become aware of our impurities, and also to reject them to a certain extent that we are purely moving towards the divine. But it's also not just leave the impurities in the midway and just move ahead. You have to turn your impurities and offer them to the divine for purification. And when you offer that to the divine, that is when the true and the right cleansing happens. That is when the transformation happens. It's not that we have just realized that, oh, this is in me, okay, fine, I'll go ahead. Because it's a part of nature. And in integral perspective, we are looking for the collective growth. So when I work out something in me, I also work out that in the collective, because I'm not different from the collective, I'm also a part of the collective. So the first and the foremost thing is to become aware that, okay, what are the impurities in me? And why are the impurities in me? And also, this can be only valid in a sense when we have a very objective view of our impurities. It's not that, oh, I have this impurity, no. It's like, okay, I have this impurity. So that objectivity towards your own self will help you to see it and then to offer it. Because it's often the case, no, even when we are growing up, we realize that if a child in the class sees that, okay, I don't know the answer, or the teacher asked me, or I forgot the notebook today, there's really shrinking that, oh my God, what will happen? Because we are given such a fear-based environment which creates a notion of perfection that we are often afraid to admit that what is wrong, or what is incomplete rather, if not wrong. And because we build so much notion around that, no, you cannot do a mistake, or the idea of perfection is so ingrained in us that we forget that the path to perfection goes through imperfection. We forget the middle part of the story. And it's there when the actual path or the actual process of yoga is. So even now when we are all grown up, we realize we have been shown the path by the masters. We realize that even if I find my own imperfection, it's not related to the image I hold. It's not related to my identity. It is a play of nature. So becoming aware of my impurities, simultaneously becoming aware of that this is a container in which the play of forces happen. So if I'm opening myself more and more, I'm also opening myself to the negative, I'm also opening myself to the positive. And that is why the more you walk the path of yoga, the more you pray for protection. We keep talking about divine grace. Why? Because it's opening. It's like the glass is there, you can pour anything. So what is being poured in you, you have to become very conscious. And that is what we keep saying, that consciousness, become aware, be conscious. All those terminologies which we use is essentially that become more and more vigilant of the kind of company you keep, the kind of places you visit. Because end of the day, it's a play of forces, often intangible to us, because we are mostly occupied with the surface interactions with the world. Because we are essentially mental beings, we seek form. Our entry point in the world is through something which is very, very tangible. But often if we just go one step deeper, we realize that all of us have experiences more than once at least where we enter a place or we speak to a person, we don't feel good or we feel drained. We may not pinpoint that this is what is wrong or that person fundamentally said something wrong or did something wrong. It's just that the feeling is not right. So we all have those experiences, but we have not learned to give them words. We have not learned the vocabulary of our inner being. We are so caught up with the vocabulary of a surface nature, which is so transactional in nature, which is so form-oriented, that though from the beginning that essence is very alive in us, but we don't know the vocabulary or the language to contact that essence. So even if that essence speaks to us, we feel that no, because that's a very faint, silent voice attempting to reach us, but the noise in the world often overpowers it. And that is why that noise tells us, no, you have to be perfect, you cannot have this, you cannot have this. So there's a false notion of identity which all of us hold. And the funny part or the tricky part is that we often want to work towards what others think of us, but usually what most of the time governs us is that what we think of ourselves. It's the subliminal messaging which we keep giving ourselves on a daily basis of who we are, what we do, what is our worth, that determines our everyday life. And in that, if I keep giving myself that message, oh, I have this, oh, I don't have this, so that constant nagging of what I lack, concentrating, but secretly aspiring to have everything. So logically, if you have to bring in your energy, you concentrate on what you want, rather than concentrating on what you don't want. But often our secret prayer or our secret focus is what is wrong, and we are wanting that suddenly everything becomes right. So that effort part is often in a very passive way of wanting to change, talking about change, but the active part of actual changing is missing. And that is why it is very, very easy for us to really brush our impurities under the carpet. Because if we don't see it, it doesn't exist. So the first and the foremost step for us is that when we start walking the path, and essentially when I say path, we are talking about the path of yoga, and more so the path of integral yoga, we keep opening ourselves, we keep exploring life, and we come in contact with situations, we come in contact with people with whom when we interact, we see our own impurities, we see our own imperfections. And Mother says in this commentary especially that if you meet such kind of people, if you get across such kind of situations, treat it as a treasure. Treat it as that you have discovered a hidden treasure, which means essentially the possibility of change. That because of my exchange with you, there is so much I could see in myself. Because there's another place where Mother has said, no, that if you see something wrong in somebody, be very sure that it is in you. And that is the reason you're seeing it. It's like in everyday language we say that people are the mirror to you, your soul, or to your surface, or whatever. Essentially because somewhere your mind at one level is occupied with that, but it has failed to express it or identify it to your own being because you are holding on to an image. So the moment you see that in something or somebody else, you're like, yeah, this is the problem. Because psychologically it really removes that burden from you, that, oh my God, I am not alone in this, but you will not admit it because you're bound to your image. So it's like you are the problem, you have this problem. So that displacement which happens, the path of yoga makes us very conscious that first place, this is displacement. And second, it is not about me or you, it is about the situation. So you become very situation oriented, you become very problem focused to move towards solution. Because if you learn to see yourself as an instrument and a place where the play of forces is happening, you can also see the same in the other person. So that is not anymore personal. And when you move a step away from the personal, that is when you actually start solving the problems. Because otherwise you're just stuck with the problem. You did this to me, therefore I did this to you, then you did this to me, and that's a vicious cycle. And most of us have experienced that largely our problems are either personal or professional, because that is where a deep sense of identity lies. So the more and more we step back and develop an objective view about our life, the more and more we see the play, what is happening, and what is my contribution. So it's like something is happening in the middle and the two people are standing. So the moment I have that image, then I can also have the image, how can these two people come together and solve? So that is how the change in the collective happens. So I will not, if I get to know about me something which, say, talking to you or, say, speaking right now, the attitude with which you take it makes all the difference. And that attitude comes through the path of yoga. Because once you start walking the path of yoga, your aspiration is to progress. And it's very much embedded in our everyday life also, no? Like, say, our education system. You give an exam, you go to another class. You give an exam, you go to another class. That is the kind of same mechanism we are following in our own self. I come across an impurity, I was like, okay, this is an impurity. Then I offer it to, say, the higher power in me. I see with my own limited surface personality, what can I do? Then I solve it, then I move ahead, then I face another impurity, because there's no dearth of impurities in surface nature. And it's not anything individual or personal. If you also want to understand, we can look at ourselves from the lens of evolution. In fact, that is the bedrock of integral yoga. That the process of evolution is such that we are growing, say, out of the mud. We are coming from that matter, from life to energy, and finally we are at the mind. So we are carrying all those impurities of the past. So I can either sit here and think of, oh my God, I have so many impurities. Or I can know I have a gift of mind. Can I just use that mind and work on those impurities? So that is why the attitude with which I go out in the world makes all the difference and has great impact on what path do I choose for myself. And so the first step, when we say that become more and more aware of your impurities, the next logical step which comes is speak the truth. And speak the truth most likely to your own self. Forget the world right now. That how often and how sincerely you can admit the truth of the situation and of the person and of yourself to yourself. That there is no gap between, like how I was talking about the image earlier, that you are not holding on to an image in yourself, that how if I'm talking to my own self, say about a situation which I encountered, or if a person I interacted with, at least with my own self, I maintain that sense of transparency, that this is the situation. If I felt a desire which ideally I should not feel, but am I capable and able to admit it to myself at least? Or I'm also holding back that, no, what will I think about my own self? Because we often do, because we are very dear to our own self. Though inside we keep criticizing and we're talking about, oh my God, see, there's so much in me, what to do. We like talking about our problems, no, because that is also a sense of identity assertion. The other person will say, no, you are so good. No, see, there are so many problems. And the other person will tell you, no, there are 2-3 different good things about you. Then you'll be like, yeah, secretly I knew, but I just wanted to feel better. So that is a game which we keep playing with our own selves. So even when I'm playing that game with myself, fine. But am I aware that I'm playing the game? So how, step by step, I'm going back? And that is what is very different from, say, the integral yoga or any other traditional method, that we have that freedom to explore without judgment. So even when I'm talking about purification, I'm not focusing so much about the morality of it, that I have to dress a certain way, I have to follow a certain method of purification, that my outer should look like this, my thoughts should be like this. I was like, yes, these are the guidelines one can or ideally should, but the outer purification is just the first step. That should lead you to the inner purification. And the inner purification should have that freedom to explore, that admission that, yes, these are the impurities in me, now what do I do? And when I keep talking about impurities, the next logical question can come in, but what are these impurities? Like we keep saying impurity, impurity. So the moment you become more conscious of, say, the nature, and when I say nature, we are referring to, say, our emotions, our thoughts, our feelings, our actions. Those are what are our window to the world. So that is the first phase which we call in the integral philosophy, the surface nature. And because I spoke about evolution, it's the reason which gives the impurities to that surface nature. And so we can begin from where we are. So how we speak about the near to the far approach. Yes, I'm very much hooked to my surface nature. I like interacting with people. I'm not so much of an inward person. I'm not so much into sitting into the meditation. I like interacting. So if I like interacting, if I like engaging with the world, that becomes my tool. So every time I engage with the world, I see which part of my being is more active. And am I, say, if I'm working, if I'm talking to my, say, a colleague who's senior to me, what is the kind of emotion I'm going through? Or am I feeling a sense of narrowness? Is there fear more evident? And I was like, am I more a person of authority? Or for me, I can really see people together. So what is happening in me? That is the first thing which brings in. And then even if you have a conflict, say you have ill thoughts about your senior, but you also know that personally you have nothing. So to kind of distinguish that it's the work which is creating the problem, not the person. So that will also give you a window of not judging yourself, not judging the other person. Because it's the nature, like if you are really operating on the principle of self-preservation, you will feel threatened, you will want to protect yourself. So every time a thought occurs to you or you experience a feeling, realize that it's coming from the outside because it's the nature. So the more you become aware, you see that, okay, this is it, now how can I work on it? So often in our own, we see that the emotions and the physical. So I want to be very much competitive and I want to take part in something which my body doesn't allow. So there's a conflict in my emotions and my strength. Then there's a conflict between, say, my physical and my mental. I have a habit which I really, really want to change, but physical has the habit, mind wants to change, another conflict. Then I really want to fulfill, say, a desire to eat unhealthy food, but my mind is saying no. So there is another interlock between, say, desire and reason. So all of us feel all of these things on a regular basis. So how to become aware of it and then start purifying it? And purification at all levels is very, very important. Say, for example, I'm talking right now, so let's start with purification of speech. Again, Mother has given a very interesting quote, like I'm not quoting, but the summary of it is, it's easy to be silent than to speak the right thing. And that also gives us a sense that, okay, I don't know what to speak, so I'm silent. So inside I might be burning, I might be like thinking 10,000 thoughts, but I'm not talking. But to actually say the right thing from the right consciousness, that is more difficult. And that is what our aspiration is, that is what, when things actually change. So it's not that even if I'm not creating outside, I'm creating in my head, and that is also some sort of creation. So how to even purify, not by saying, but also inside. So that is why I say that it's a simultaneous process, that how you are engaging in the world, and also how you are engaging in your inner world. So there's an outer world, there's an inner world. So the more purification happen in your inner world, through your connection with the divine, through your opening to the divine, through whatever individual sadhana you do, that has an implication on how you react and engage in the outer world. And this is when the path becomes more and more closer, more and more transparent. The purification leads to transformation. And this is the process which really, really help us to explore. And with purification of thought, because at evolution we stand at the mind level, purification of emotion. So if you're more of an emotional person, if you're more of a vital explorer, you can choose the kind of art which really helps purify. You can choose the form of music which really takes you to higher levels and not lower your consciousness. Because essentially when we began with talking about, say, the fool and the sage, we are talking about narrowness and expansion of consciousness. So anything which pulls you down, you avoid. Everything which brings you closer to the divine, you gravitate towards. So that is the main bottom line. And more when you open yourself, the more and more it's like opening that Pandora's box, that, oh my God, there is so much in me. And taking that from a sense of objectivity, offering a lot of love and compassion to your own self. In fact, all of those things which we talk about, because we like talking and we like to play a part in our own journey, because then what story will we tell ourselves? Because everybody has a story in their mind of who they are and what they are capable of. So once we engage with what our story is, what we are capable of, what we are doing, simultaneously there's an inner journey which is already happening. And this story is a very tiny part of it. And once we become aware of that larger picture, we realize that slowly we become more and more silent, and then the larger picture really takes over. And that is when you actually experience what we are talking about. So sharing, speaking, articulating are just preliminary steps to direct ourselves to the path. The actual story is really going behind us. So more and more we will to progress, we have that aspiration intact, we really go deeper and deeper, and then we be silent, and then the work is done. So it's not that the work will only be done when I'm talking about it. The work is anyway happening. If I can just, it's like, if I can't give a solution, can I create less problems? It's like that. So if I'm becoming more and more aware of myself, I will create less problems. So the higher power will be like, okay, now let me work through you, because I anyway have to work through you. So the lesser you will come in my way, the more the effect will be. And so everything said and done in that sense, and on a daily basis, just become aware of those impurities, what you're feeding yourself. So we keep talking about, say, in the larger context, but if you really look at in the day-to-day life, just if we become a little more aware of what we are feeding ourselves. Especially, I keep talking about this in the age of social media, this mindless scrolling. We are being exposed to so much of information, most of that is which is not required for us. And we being mental beings, we have that justification that, oh, it's okay. And there's an illusion of freedom which is created that I can follow the channel I want, I can subscribe to the channel I want, I can read or go through whatever I want. So it makes you feel very independent and you feel that, yes, I have that ability. Essentially, you are just being slave to what they're providing you. And the kind of chaos it is creating in your mind, the kind of vital mental disturbances it is creating in your being, we have no idea about it. So how to really, if not disengage, but minimize and become more conscious of what you're feeding yourself. So feeding is not just food. Suddenly people have become very, very conscious of what they eat because physical is the most tangible thing. But we often forget that, fine, we talk about that, okay, this is the environment in which you should cook food, it is the ingredients which you should eat, all of those things. But what is the mind and emotion connection in relation to the world? That is also one thing which is very, very important for us to bring to our awareness and not focus on so much of what if, but bring our awareness more to what is. So the more what is we become as a go-to, what if will already be solved. So the more and more becoming aware of the present moment, seeking my ability, becoming more aware of the filtration process, and letting go of things which are not required. So this is the process which one needs to take in, and even when you become aware of your impurity, realize that are you parking it or are you processing it? So it's like, okay, I got to know this, yeah, it's okay. So just and even anyway, I'm not saying that it's either or. So maybe if I want to park it right now because I don't feel capable enough to work on it, that is also fine. But at least whatever I'm doing, I'm conscious of it. The idea is not of what to do or what not to do. The idea is what I'm doing, am I aware of it? So we keep talking about action in itself has no meaning as such, but the intention is what drives the action. And all the path and all the processes we talk about, it is more and more coming to that very intention. That the more my intention is refined, I'm more present to it, my action is anyway a byproduct of my intention. But because we are so form-oriented, we are always at what is the action, what is the action. So yes, all of these things have a place, but we just have to see that what is my starting point, how do I enter, how do I unify all these things. So though I'm talking about mind, emotion, body separately, but when you're looking at me, you're just looking at one person. So essentially they are together, yet they are different. So where is the difference? How do you unite it? All of those things one needs to become aware of the mindless things and become more conscious. And in the last, I would like to say that if nothing works, just surrender to the divine. Love is something which is above purification. Love is transformation. So even if you are too lazy to work and think of, oh my God, I have to do so much, just keep praying and open yourself to the divine, to the mother or whoever you want to, and the work will be done because love overpowers everything and it really has that power of transformation. So even you can begin with just loving yourself, having that compassion for yourself, to your fellow beings, and just that pure attitude of surrender to the mother, and let the transformation happen, let the purification happen, and you become the right instrument for the work to be done. And just to end, to just quote Mother and just kind of summarize in a way that all of us have that sense of purity which we're talking about. I think I actually wanted to talk about purification, but the way I spoke more of the impurities to just give a sense of possibility. So to just end with a few lines by the Mother, and kind of give us that hope. Whatever may be the past, whatever may be the faults committed, whatever the ignorance in which might have lived, one carries deep within oneself the supreme purity, which can translate itself into a wonderful realization. So not to forget that we have that purity, that spark which we call the divine spark. It's just a matter of giving that right environment for it to evolve. And when that happens, with the inner liberation, with the total sincerity and perfect purity, all suffering will disappear, because it will no longer be necessary for the progress of the consciousness towards its final goal. So we just all have to work towards that goal and help each other evolve. Thank you. Now I would just like Dr. Bijlani to come in and share his thoughts. Thank you.
The entire life is a sort of a process, and so is yoga. Because all life is yoga, and it's just that when life becomes conscious, we are living life consciously, then we enter the phase when this yoga becomes conscious, and still it remains a process, and may take thousands of lives before we reach the final goal, or what we may call the product. And in fact, being obsessed with the product does not in any way shorten the process. And on that there's a little story. Once there was a disciple who was given all guidance on how to reach that terminal point, that summit, that goal of perfection. And he followed it very meticulously, followed all the instructions very meticulously for more than 20 years. And then asked his guru, have I reached there? The guru said, no, not yet, because you have not been doing things as expected. So this disciple was very disappointed, and he thought that all these years I have missed so much. My friends were enjoying so much in the world, eating this and that, going to this place and that, and so on, and I have missed everything. And I have not even reached the goal, so what is the point? So he started changing his lifestyle. He started living the way the rest of the world seemed to be living and enjoying. But then he found that he was not really enjoying it. He couldn't understand what is it in all this that people seem to enjoy so much. So he said, well, whether I reach the goal or not, I'll continue living the way I was enjoying it. And so he went back to his same old austere and simple lifestyle, the lifestyle which he was living for the sake of reaching the goal. Then his guru told him that now you have reached the summit, you reached the goal. So he said, how come so quickly? In all those 20 years I didn't, and now within a few days or weeks I have reached there. How did that miracle happen? So the guru told him, all those more than 20 years, you were doing all this with the desire to reach a goal. Now even that desire is gone, and that is the summit. So it's only when we give up this obsession with the product, the final goal, that in fact, if at all it is possible, the process becomes shorter. So the journey of yoga is long, but it's an enjoyable journey, and one has to learn to enjoy the journey. A part of this process is purification, because if yoga is about being pure, then who can claim to be the one who has reached the final goal and lacks all impurities? But then from early life we are conditioned to looking at any impurity or a fault with a sense of fear. And in many religious traditions it corresponds to the concept of sin. So we avoid sin because of the fear of God. We avoid mistakes in childhood because of the fear of parents. So all types of defects are associated with a sense of fear, as Aditi pointed out very beautifully. And therefore when we detect a fault, we feel sad. We try to hide it and remain under the illusion, if I don't see it, it doesn't exist, as Aditi said. And the important thing is to speak the truth to yourself. Acknowledge the defect and work on it. And in this section of the commentaries on the Dhammapada, the mother has said that instead of feeling sad at detecting a fault, which is natural because we associate a fault with a sin and a sense of fear, so instead of feeling sad, rejoice. Why rejoice? Because you discovered something on which you can work and move towards progress. And if you can't discover it on your own, then if somebody helps you discover it, maybe good company, the company of a sage, then be grateful for having that company and rejoice that that person made you see your fault. That sage may make you see your fault by directly telling you what is wrong with you, or you may indirectly pick up by observing the sage closely and discover what is the weakness that I have but this person doesn't seem to be having, and that's how indirectly you pick up from this person what I should work on. And that's what Sri Aurobindo calls the influence of the Guru, the vibrations of the Guru. It may not be even as tangible as that you observe that this person does not have that weakness. It's just that the positive vibrations create in you a sense of energy, a sense of sincerity, which in itself leads to that detection of the fault. But instead, very often what we do is we reduce it to a game. Aditi said, we play a game. I say that, well, I have these faults and feel happy that at least I am humble enough to acknowledge it to somebody, and that person tells us, no, but you have all these good qualities, and we'll say, well, I knew these good qualities also, and then, we feel that I have been humble, so I have been good, I have these good qualities, we feel good, and the matter ends there. Now, this is a game. Now, what is a game? A game essentially is activity without achievement. Because in a game you really don't achieve anything. Winning and losing has no meaning. So it's activity without achievement. And for that, again, I'll give you a little example how it can happen. Suppose you decide to go shopping. After you left home and walked some distance, you discover that I forgot to bring money. So you go back. Maybe not even, you didn't bring money, you didn't even bring the card or whatever, These days people carry cards rather than money. So you go back home and with money. Then you discover after you walked some distance, I forgot to bring the shopping list. Then you again go back home. And the third time you come, then you discover something else is missing. I forgot to bring the bag. I shouldn't be getting plastic bags from the shops. I should have brought a cloth bag or jute bag. So, you keep going back and forth. Lot of activity, but no achievement. So that is the type of game that we end up playing with our faults also. So here, that's how the effect of company becomes important. The company we keep, because working on ourselves entirely on our own is not easy. That is why we need a guru. But then the guru may be one, but there can be many teachers. And in that sense, all conditions and circumstances can be teachers. All people around us can be teachers. Anything can be a teacher. And so the more the company we keep of those from whom we could learn something in some way or the other, and that is a person we can call the sage, the better it is. And that is why we all have this concept of Satsang. Satsang essentially means the company of good people at a good place. And that is how getting together here on every Sunday like this itself has a value irrespective of what is spoken, because it has that subtle effect of keeping us in good company, which will help us, apart from other things, also seeing our faults, acknowledging them, working on them, and offering them to the divine. Well, I can't do it all by myself, but at least we'll clear these obstacles for the divine can then work on us. Because what are those obstacles? The obstacle is not acknowledging it. The obstacle is having all sorts of doubts and questions which don't really solve anything. The obstacles are the games that we play, in which we are indulging in a lot of activity without any achievement. And finally end with a little example on how company can be of great importance. It's a little out of the context, but in the eye, we have in front a cornea, the transparent curved little thin membrane which is right in the front of the eye. And this is the part that gets damaged with any injury, and if it gets damaged so much that it leads to an opacity, the person can turn blind. So it is through this the light goes. Behind that we have a big fat lens. And if you were to measure the power of that lens on its own, keep it just in, take it out and measure its power is around 40 diopters. Very powerful lens. Whereas this cornea as a thin little curved membrane would not have much power. But then the interesting thing is that this cornea contributes about 40 diopters to the power of the eye, and the lens only 10 diopters. How does that happen? That happens because the cornea has the air on one side and the fluid behind, whereas the lens has fluid on both sides. So having fluid on both sides reduces the power of the lens, and having air on one side and fluid on the other enhances the power of the cornea. Probably you cannot easily find another example of how company can affect your power.